Most people who've heard of Devil May Cry probably know it's related to Dante's Inferno, a poem about hell written by a man named Dante. But what's fascinating and not immediately clear is just how deeply poetry is tied into the Devil May Cry series. Devil May Cry may be an epic poem in itself, and the poetic themes and parallels are all centered around Vergil Sparta. Dante Alighieri was an Italian poet born in 1265, who was exiled from his home city by his political rivals. Enraged by this travesty, the man would spend the last 12 years of his life writing a 3-part epic, in which he was a self-inserted character, weaving together religious history, thought, and symbolism, recent historical and political events, pagan gods, and myths. He created a masterpiece unlike any other, depicting a journey through hell, purgatory, and heaven, which arranged the entire cosmos in a system of divine ordination that was incredibly detailed and full of political and social commentary. It would change Christianity forever, even influencing the religion itself. The Catholic Church at the time didn't really have a solid idea of what the afterlife looked like. Ideas like, is hell for forever, or is purgatory real, were still being argued, and Dante's map of the afterlife provided the framework they needed to solidify Christian theology. The central focus of the poem is a journey. Dante, lost in the woods, becomes trapped by demons and has no way to escape, when a figure appears to lead him to redemption. That figure is Vergil, the spirit of a long-since deceased Roman poet, who was himself sent by a heavenly messenger. Beatrice, a woman from heaven who represents divine love and was based on a girl Dante met when he was 12 and apparently fell immediately in love with, even though they never spoke, and he ended up marrying somebody else. This man was inventing middle school fanfiction tropes in the European Middle Ages. Hell is divided into 3 spheres and 9 circles, each of which deals with varying crimes in different ways. The worse the crime, the lower the circle, until you reach the very bottom. That's where a giant frozen Lucifer sits trapped in the lake of Cocytus, chewing on the 3 worst traitors in history for all time. The first Devil May Cry has a very thin plot. Dante is a young man on a quest to avenge his murdered mother and brother, who died 20 years ago at the hands of demons. He is himself part demon, and his father was the legendary Dark Knight Sparta. His brother Vergil and mother Eva and his dad are all long gone by the time the game begins. Already the Italian overtones are on full throttle. In Japanese, the character named Sparta is said in a way that sounds like the Italian word for sword, and of course both Dante and Vergil are named for the Italian poets at the heart of the Divine Comedy. Inferno opens with our protagonist lost midway in life's journey, which in the Middle Ages meant he was around 35. While getting further lost, he is attacked by 3 terrible creatures, a lion, a leopard, and a she-wolf. These 3 monstrosities represent the 3 major divisions of hell: sins of incontinence, or lack of self-control, sins of violence, and sins of fraud, or lying and betrayal. Faced with these monsters, Dante is sure to be overcome when, lo and behold, Vergil appears. Vergil was an ancient Roman poet most famous for writing the Aeneid, and a much-admired poet of Dante's given the role the author gave the man in his epic poem. Appearing before Dante, Vergil arrives to save him and guide him back to righteousness, but it's going to take going through hell first. Of course, he didn't come of his own volition. It was the spirit of a woman, Beatrice, who sent him from heaven on high. The 2 figures of Beatrice and Vergil represent divine love and human reason, the combination of which makes a complete devout human figure. Ironically, Vergil is named for the embodiment of human capability. As for Trish, her original name in development early on was Beatrice. Our Dante is pretty lost. His family's gone, he lives in a dump, and he's yet to awaken his demonic heritage in full power. Then Trish walks in, challenging him and gives him a job, which will lead him to Malay Island and the devilish delights therein. We don't know about Vergil yet, but he too awaits on the island, and so the board is set. A journey to hell and 2 guides to get Dante there. Vergil, the brother, the poet, limited human reason, and our Beatrice, a clone of Dante's mother, the woman who represents the last happy time in his life and the love that he's lost. Of course, this is a journey that takes place across multiple games, and it would be remiss not to mention that there's more than one leading lady in Dante's journey. In the Inferno, as Dante and Vergil head toward hell, Vergil explains that not 1, but 3 women from heaven sent him on his way to help the lost poet. The first is Beatrice, representing the love of God. The second is Saint Mary, and the third is Saint Lucia. The 3 major female figures of the series, the 3 who play the deuteragonists to Dante's leading man, who represent humanity, family, love, and friendship, are all in the first canto of the Inferno. Having followed Trish to Malay Island, the player begins exploring the creepy castle, trying to find a way forward, while likely also wondering what the fuck is up with this weird castle. Examining objects reveals it's a 12th century castle from medieval Europe full of occult books, black magic, and alchemy, which at some point started to fuck with the people living there and then became a teleporting magic island. It's a little fuzzy, but suffice to say that the backstory of the castle matches our Italian parallels. It's from around Dante's time and location, and the Gothic architecture of the castle has its roots in the Gothic style of the European Middle Ages. Same time, same place. The first major task is to find a way past the Judge of Death, which manifests after Dante touches a magic sword and proceeds, for the second time, to be electrocuted and stabbed. The sword is named Alistair, and the name and electric powers are homages to Zeus and his role as the Alaster. An Alaster was a spirit of vengeance, especially associated with revenge related to familial feuds. One of Zeus's epithets, or nicknames, was Alistair, and it became a title associated with a family of spirits and later Christian demons. The most famous use of the term in fiction comes from Electra, a story in which a pair of siblings murder their mother to avenge the murder of their father, which involves stabbing the woman in the throat with a sword. Dante, too, is on a quest for vengeance related to familial ties, and Alastair's appearance being the first major event in the castle is pretty on point. Once the sword is in his grasp, the statue changes to a skull-faced god. This Judge of Death locks the door that leads to the next area, and Dante has to find the Staff of Judgment to pass him by. Let's jump back to the Inferno. Having met Vergil and walked to the entrance of Hell, Dante and his guide pass by the outer areas outside Hell where some folks just chill, the pagan dead, unbaptized babies, until they reach the actual entrance to Hell. Just inside they meet the Judge of Death, Minos, taken from the mythic figure who in Greek tradition also judged souls in Hell. The sinners approach Minos, confess their sins, and then are assigned a circle in Hell, and no one can enter the lower world without first passing his judgment. Dante the Demon is following Dante the Poet's storyline exactly. He enters the outer reaches, finds the way barred by a Judge of Death, and must pass judgment to get by. Once that's done, he's faced with a new trial, obtaining the Pride of Lions so he may face the Guardian and enter further into the castle. This chapter is called Destroyer of Ardor, a fancy word for passion, which is the very first circle of sin Dante enters in the Inferno, right after passing the Judge. Remember the 3 monsters Dante faced outside Hell? The leopard, the lion, and the she-wolf, representing 3 divisions of Hell. In the game, Dante faces a cat creature, summoned by the Pride of Lion, representing his own initial descent into the circles of Hell. After defeating Shadow, the Guardian, Dante finds himself navigating a tower made of several broken-off sections. The goal is to obtain a sword called Death Sentence at the top of the tower, and use it on a female statue to obtain the melancholy soul. Just as it's obtained, a cutscene reveals a strange mirror out of which walks Nero Angelo, otherwise known as The death sentence is a serrated sword, made not for use in battle but ceremonial purposes. A death sentence is just that, a judgment passed down. It wasn't long ago we passed through the doors of the judge of death and were passing judgment. But who was being judged? And whose soul is the melancholy soul that appears just before Nero Angelo's arrival? Nero Angelo is a phrase from Canto 23, wherein Dante asks a spirit to guide them out of the pit in a way that won't require black angels to come and extricate us from the deep. The black angels are the fallen angels who rebelled against God and were thrown into the pit, and in Italian are referred to as Nero Angelo. Just before meeting Nero Angelo, Dante obtains the melancholy soul, an item used to progress later on. Why does the game wait until you obtain the item to show Nero Angelo, when it could have triggered the fight the first time you entered the room? Because the item represents Nero Angelo and Vergil himself, and it too is a reference to Inferno. In the Longfellow translation, the phrase melancholy soul appears exactly once, in reference again to fallen angels. These are angels who picked no side in the war, neither for nor against God, instead playing for whichever side would benefit them personally. Being only out for themselves, these angels are now damned and alone, belonging neither to heaven nor hell. They are wandering melancholy souls with no hope even in death. To obtain the item in DMC, the player must get past the judge, receive the death sentence, use the sword to symbolically kill the holder of the soul, and only then does Nero Angelo appear. The person being judged, the angel who rebelled, the one who fought only for himself, the melancholy soul cursed to wander between heaven and hell, Vergil. This soul becomes a guiding soul, in the words of the game, that guides the player through the next level, to the guiding light, a key to the sun door in the Castellan's chambers. Not long after the section with the guiding light key, Dante will find himself in a misty forest full of monsters. The only way out is to follow a ball of light, which becomes subsumed inside of any demon in the area. You have to fight and free the light trapped within, and then the light will guide you home. Vergil is currently trapped deep within a monster's carapace, and only by fighting him do you set his light free, and it is this light that leads Dante on his way. Of course, that doesn't make it a happy thing. It's also described as a light of sorrow in one note, and it is painful to hold. The guiding key hurts the player until it's used, and the note on the door says only those who can bear it are able to move forward. Nero Angelo isn't defeated the first time. He'll return for a second showdown in the Lost Land, an area centered around Arthurian myth. Dante must become the king of Avalon to turn the wheel of destiny, and doing so requires obtaining the chalice. The final area where the chalice rests is where Nero Angelo is faced for a second time. In Christian myth, the chalice is a symbol of heaven and divine love, the goblet into which the crucified Jesus bled, and DMC lore says that's this chalice. To obtain it, you must have the sign of chastity, referring to sexual purity, something only Galahad of Arthurian myth was capable of, since his dad was an adulterer and everyone else was doing it. After many adventures, he obtains the cup and ascends to heaven, completely chaste, which apparently Dante also is. Nero Angelo appears just before Dante can complete his quest and obtain the goblet, a sign that Dante is a pure heavenly being, ready to ascend from hell to heaven. Still, he's not defeated here either, and flees for a second time. Dante obtains the cup, uses it to move forward, and eventually returns to the castle. Before fighting Nero Angelo for a third time, the player must face the confronter of the path, Pluto's dragon. In the Inferno, Plutos is a monster faced in the fourth circle, and when he attempts to stop Vergil and Dante, he's easily defeated when confronted by the elder poet. So collapsed Plutus into that dead clay. Having obtained the Quicksilver, Dante moves on to his third and final showdown with Nero Angelo. Here we finally see his face, though Dante does not recognize his brother until he falls, and the second amulet is revealed. Here we realize what's been happening all along. Our own brother turned to dark purposes, fighting to reclaim his fate, came to face his brother one last time, and being defeated was set free. The guiding light is now revealed. It's only with the combined pieces of the perfected amulet that Dante can continue through hell. Only with Vergil's guidance that he can keep going. Only this isn't Dante's Inferno, is it? Because Vergil isn't beside us, guiding us. He's a ghost, a haunting light, an enemy pushing us forward until he's finally defeated and becomes only a memory left to mourn. The tragic twist of Devil May Cry's Inferno is that our pair traveling through hell are not only brothers, but brothers at opposite purposes, turned against each other by a foul demon, Mundus. This is a story about traitors. It's strewn throughout the myths and the references spread through the background. The deepest, darkest pit of hell is reserved for traitors. Lucifer is frozen in a giant pit, chewing on history's worst traitors. Mundus is heavily associated with Lucifer, and he betrays both his servants. Trish also betrays Dante, and Dante too performs an unknowing betrayal in killing his own brother. The game even calls it a betrayal. A note in the library says that Pluto shall come on the promised date, and one with black wings of treachery shall stop him. Dante only obtains his black wings, or his full devil trigger form, after killing Vergil. Cain and Abel, Jesus and Judas, King Arthur and Mordred, Remus and Romulus. The myths and motifs of Devil May Cry are strewn with the figures of loved ones, especially blood-related, killing or betraying one another. The cup that took divine blood after Jesus was betrayed, which itself is layered in the myths of the King of Avalon betrayed by his own nephew. The Roman motifs call to mind the twin brothers who legend says built the city, and in many stories, Romulus kills his brother. The story of the Inferno is that of a singular man lost on life's journey being guided by a great poet. And in Devil May Cry, that story is blended with half a dozen myths of blood treachery into one in which the guided betrays his guide and his exit from hell is drenched in blood. Dante's Inferno places treachery as the worst sin, at the bottom of the pit, and Dante leaves the pit through betrayal. He escapes, and Vergil, of course, does not. The Inferno, too, has to deal with the fact that Vergil is damned to hell. He is one of the pagans, born before the time of Christ, damned to limbo until the end times. While he guides Dante through hell and purgatory, he must turn back at St. Peter's gates. Dante enters heaven alone. But that's not the end of the story. In fact, it's not even the beginning. For that, we have to travel back to Devil May Cry 3, the start of the drama between Dante and Vergil. The story centers upon Vergil's quest to gain power, to which end he summons the demonic tower of Temen Nigru. Where the first game pulled on the Inferno, this game draws on the second book in Dante's Divine Comedy, Purgatorio, the journey up the mountain of Purgatory, where the repentant souls work to earn their place in heaven. In the Purgatorio, the mountain the sinful must climb is divided into sections based on the 7 sins, with the worst closest to the bottom, furthest from heaven. A set of monsters the player meets in DMC 3 include the 7 hells, demons which are named for the 7 sins of Christianity. There are also bosses that tie into the themes of these sins, including Cerberus, Agni and Rudra, Leviathan, Nevan, Beowulf, Geryon, and the Doppelganger. These 7 sins are further represented in the 7 bells which open the Hell Gate. 2 bosses in the game are taken directly from Dante's works. The first is the 3-headed dog Cerberus. In the Inferno, he's surrounded by the icy marsh of the Styx, covered in black snow, guarding the gluttons who are stuck in the frozen mire. He's a figure originally pulled from Greek myth, where the 3-headed dog acted as the guardian of Hell's entrance, which makes his appearance at the doors to the tower quite apt. The second boss from Inferno is Geryon, the blue horse demon who gives Dante power over time. He shares his name with a boatman in the Inferno, a monster of fraud who helps Dante cross a river. The name finds its origins in Greek myth, in which he was a giant and the nephew of the divine horse Pegasus, which might be why DMC's Geryon is a devil horse. A few of the items in the game are also pulled from Dante. The first comes from the siren statue, found in the coffin room. In the Purgatorio, the appearance of the siren is a major episode, in which the figure from myth sings to Dante and nearly pulls him away from Vergil. The elder poet has to intervene to save the man from the siren's song. The second item is the ambrosia, described in the game as a forbidden fruit, which refers to the fruit of knowledge. The tree that bore said fruit appears in Canto 24 of Purgatorio, and is described as having an ambrosial smell. In the first game, Vergil was a fallen angel, damned to wander the world. Here we see him before his fall, but the angelic references are still strong. Beowulf, implied to be a fallen angel, is defeated by Vergil in a scene that involves bright white light and feathers descending from on high. Not long after Vergil first obtains Beowulf, he is betrayed, loses his new weapon, and quite literally falls, a foreshadowing of later events. This is the story of Vergil's choice to enter Hell, first by raising the tower, then by choosing to fall into Hell. In his quest for more power, he allowed himself to be manipulated and betrayed. He turned on the last family he had left, and though he and Dante work together in the end, Vergil insists that this is as far as they come. They are simply too different. Though Dante reaches out for him, Vergil strikes him, and falls into hell of his own free will. You might wonder why there is both a hell and a purgatory in the world of the Divine Comedy. Why is it that some sinners are allowed to redeem themselves, and some are not? It's a question Dante has himself as he first explores the underworld. You see, anyone can be redeemed. Anyone can be forgiven should they wish to be. According to the Inferno, those who enter hell only do so because they refuse to repent, because they would rather cling to their own rotten behavior than kneel before God and beg forgiveness. Rather than enter paradise, they fall willingly into hell, clinging to their pride. Twice now we've seen the brothers face one another, and twice we've seen the dire consequences. Vergil, damaged and fallen. Dante, left behind in the broken remains. These two, meant to travel through hell together, only seem to become trapped deeper in the darkness. The pain of the betrayal of blood is too strong. DMC 3 reinforces that pain. Not only Dante, but Lady is also betrayed by a loved one. The cycle of violence rolls on, the search for demonic power claiming more and more lives. Will it ever end? Decades pass. In the fourth Devil May Cry game, the direct references to Dante are slim, though the architecture, artistry, and general design all pull heavily from Italian history and Catholic tradition. The game introduces us to Nero, the newest protagonist, whose journey will transform the DMC universe forever. Then we come to Devil May Cry 5. This game also has some general references to Dante. 3 demons are named for locations in the Inferno. The Hell, Judeca, Antenora, and Cana are all rivers in the lowest reaches of Hell, where traitors are imprisoned. The heavy focus on betrayal continues, and it is this theme which is the center of DMC 5, and the major holdover of Dante's influence. The exploration of the evils of traitors, especially traitors to kin. But Dante's opinion on traitors is going to come up against a new poet's voice. and the outcome of the game will differ drastically to those in the past, in which traitors were killed or sent to hell where they belonged. A new character appears in DMC 5, V, Vergil's human half, who carries with him a book of poems by William Blake. Like Dante, Blake was a writer and artist heavily influenced by Christianity. He too wrote his own mythic works and used them to critique the society he lived in. More than that, he was heavily influenced by Dante, and much of the artwork of the Divine Comedy in this video belongs to Blake. The magnum opus of Blake's creative work is his Mythic series, depicting a fictional account of the creation of the universe that he called his Devil's Bible. The first entry is the Book of Urizen, the account of the creation and fall of the universe and all that came after. It shares its name with the demonic half of Vergil's soul, the antagonist of the game. In the Book of Urizen, the creation begins with the splitting of all into pieces. From one we get two, and then many more. The first split was Urizen and Los, two separate godlike identities, and after this split, Urizen begins dividing the universe into categories, creating rules and limits that define the world. It is a mistake. Splitting the world is what causes the fall from grace. Blake is arguing against the categorization of the world, arguing that the universe is better when it is undefined and free. But the entirety of the Divine Comedy is about dividing the world into sections, hells and heavens, circles and spheres, levels and punishments. The poem is a heavily organized division of the universe, and the DMC series has followed it, step by step. We see demons categorized into types. We see the human and demon worlds opposing one another. We see brothers so similar yet turned against each other. Now these two worldviews are coming against one another. Dante's harsh division of the universe into polar opposites, good and evil, and Blake's open and accepting universe built on union, not division. The elder brothers cling to these older ideas, the world vision of Dante that sees things in black and white, enemy and friend. It is the younger generation who will find a new path to tread and drag his family along with him. Nero is on a similar path to Dante and Vergil. After all, his story in DMC 4 begins with a feud with his own blood, though he doesn't know it, and his character arc involves coming up against his adopted family. He too is a demon seeking power, yet his path to power will be very different. When Dante gains power in this series, it often comes from being physically damaged and betrayed. But every time Nero gains power, it is because of love. His desire to protect Kyrie manifests his demon arm and brings Yamato to him. Of course, the sword is not his, and it doesn't remain with him. In DMC 5, Vergil returns from hell in terrible shape, and forcibly takes the weapon from Nero. He doesn't know Nero is his son, yet inadvertently he has continued the cycle against kin. Nero refuses to continue the cycle of betrayal, refuses to see Vergil as an other and an enemy, and here we see his first full demon transformation, inspired by love, the desire to protect his family, a family he was betrayed by. Dante would say traitors belong in hell, that those who desire forgiveness can earn it, but those who don't are damned. Nero follows his father's favorite poet, and sees the world in more complexity than black and white. It doesn't matter if Vergil betrayed him. It doesn't matter if Vergil doesn't want to be forgiven. He is family, and that is all that matters. And in standing up to Dante and Vergil, Nero manages to get through to his uncle and father, and for the first time in decades, the brothers are no longer enemies. To stop the menace of the Qliphoth, they descend into hell, and become trapped once again in the underworld. But this time, they're together. They are not divided, not against each other. Here we are, ending where we began, but everything is different. The brothers stand in hell, but in standing together, it doesn't really seem like hell at all. 20 years later, Dante and Vergil finally escape the Inferno.